The lecture hall buzzed with quiet chatter as alien students from 12 different worlds settled into their seats. The room was massive, built to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Crystal creatures sat next to furry giants, while bird-like aliens perched on special stands designed for their clawed feet. Professor Vextar walked to the front of the room, his purple tentacles swaying as he moved. He was old even by his species standards, and the scars on his face told stories of battles fought long ago. The students fell silent as he approached the podium. "Today we discuss something that most of you have never heard about," Vextar began, his voice echoing through the hall. "We will talk about the forbidden wars and the banned species." Jiho, whose crystal body caught the light and threw rainbows across his desk, leaned forward with interest. Next to him sat Mira, her bright blue feathers rustling with excitement. Behind them, Dohyun shifted his massive bear-like frame, trying to get comfortable in a chair too small for his bulk. "For 847 cycles, our galaxy has known peace," Vextar continued. "We fight our wars according to the rules. We choose our battlefields. We limit our weapons. We protect the innocent. This is how civilized beings wage war." A student raised a scaly hand. "Professor, what about the old wars? Before the rules?" Vextar's tentacles darkened, a sign of deep emotion among his people. "Those days are gone. We learned from our mistakes. We created the Geneva Andromeda Accords to make sure war never again became what it once was." He touched a control on his podium, and a holographic display flickered to life above the students' heads. It showed a list of rules that governed galactic warfare. No attacks on civilian targets, no weapons of mass destruction, no total war, no genocide. "These rules have kept our galaxy stable for centuries," Vextar said. "But there is one species that can never be allowed to participate in our conflicts. One species so dangerous that their very presence would destroy everything we have built." The students whispered among themselves. They had studied every major species in the galaxy. Which one could be so terrible? Jiho raised a crystal hand. "Professor, which species are you talking about?" Vextar was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke a single word that sent a chill through the room. "Humans." The whispers stopped. The students looked confused. Mira tilted her head, her sharp eyes blinking rapidly. "Humans?" she asked. "But Professor, they are not even a spacefaring race. They live on one small planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. We barely mention them in basic alien studies." Dohyun grunted his agreement. "I have seen the reports. They still use chemical rockets and split atoms for power. They cannot even leave their own star system without help. How could they threaten anyone?" Vextar walked to the window that looked out over the academy grounds. Below, alien cadets from dozens of worlds practiced their combat skills in organized, peaceful ways. Everything was controlled. Everything was safe. That, he said slowly, is exactly what the hegemony thought 127 cycles ago. He turned back to face his students, and they saw something in his old eyes that made them uncomfortable. Fear. The hegemony was the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy, Vextar explained. They had conquered 17 worlds without losing a single major battle. Their technology was advanced. Their soldiers were well trained. Their tactics were perfect. The professor touched his control pad again. The holographic display changed to show a blue and green planet spinning slowly in space. "This is Earth," he said, "home to 8 billion humans. The hegemony decided to claim it as a mining colony. They thought it would be simple, just another primitive world to add to their empire." Jiho's crystal body flickered as he processed information. "Professor, what happened? Did the humans surrender?" Vextar laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Oh, my young student, the humans did not surrender. They did something far worse. They fought back. But how?" Mira demanded. "You said the hegemony had superior technology and training." "They did," Vextar agreed. "And that should have been enough. By all the rules of warfare we know, the humans should have given up after the first week, maybe the first day." The room was completely silent now. Every student was focused on their professor, sensing that they were about to learn something important. Something that would change how they saw the galaxy. Vextar moved to the center of the room, his tentacles moving slowly as he spoke. "The hegemony sent 50,000 soldiers to occupy Earth. They used standard invasion protocols. Disable the military. Contact the government. Process the civilians. Clean, efficient, civilized." He paused, looking at each of his students. For the first 2 days, everything went according to plan. Human military bases were destroyed. Their governments were contacted for surrender talks. Civilian populations were being moved to safe zones. It looked like a textbook operation. Then what changed? Do-Yun asked, his deep voice rumbling through the hall. Vextar's expression grew dark. The humans stopped fighting like soldiers. They stopped fighting like anything we had ever seen before. The holographic display shifted to show tactical maps and battle reports. Red markers showed hegemony positions. Blue markers showed human forces. At first, the pattern looked normal. Then it became chaos. Look at these reports, Vextar said, pointing to the display. Day 3. Human military units scattered into small groups. Day 4. Attacks on supply lines instead of military targets. Day 5. Civilian facilities begin producing weapons. Mira's feathers ruffled with confusion. Civilians? Professor, that violates every law of war. Civilians are not combatants. Tell that to the humans, Vextar replied grimly. Their farmers began poisoning food meant for occupation forces. Their engineers sabotaged power plants. Their children learned to build bombs from household items. The students looked at each other with growing horror. This was not war as they understood it. This was something else entirely. But, Professor, Jiho said, his voice barely above a whisper, what about their leaders? What about surrender negotiations? Vextar turned to face the young crystal being. There were no leaders to negotiate with. Every human became their own commander. Every human became their own army. The hegemony had prepared to fight a species. Instead, they found themselves fighting a planet. The old professor walked back to his podium, his tentacles moving slowly with the weight of memory. Tomorrow, we will study what happened next, he said quietly. We will learn why the mightiest military force in the galaxy was defeated by a species that had never left their home. World, he looked out at his students one last time. And we will understand why humans must never, ever be allowed to participate in galactic warfare. The class ended in silence, with every student deep in thought about what they had just learned. The next day, the lecture hall was packed. Word had spread about Professor Vexitar's previous lesson, and now students from other classes crowded into the available seats. Even some instructors stood along the walls, curious to hear the rest of the story. Vextar noticed the larger audience but said nothing. He simply activated the holographic display and began where he had left off. The Terran Integration War, he announced. That is what the official records call it. A simple name for something that changed how we think about warfare forever. The hologram showed a detailed map of Earth as it appeared 127 cycles ago. Cities, military bases, and industrial centers were marked with bright symbols. Jiho raised his hand. Professor, you said the humans fought back, but surely it was not effective. The hegemony had plasma weapons and energy shields. Humans only had metal bullets and explosive shells. Vextar nodded. You are correct about their technology. But you are thinking like a civilized being. You assume that technology alone determines the outcome of war. He touched his controls and the display changed to show the first day of the invasion. Sleek hegemony ships descended through Earth's atmosphere while bright beams of energy struck military targets on the ground. The invasion began at sunrise. Earth time, Vextar explained. Hegemony forces targeted every major military installation on the planet. Bases, airfields, command centers, weapons factories. Within 6 hours, Earth's organized military was effectively destroyed. Mira shifted uncomfortably on her perch. Then it should have been over. Without their military, the humans had no way to resist. That is what the hegemony thought, Vextar agreed. Their commanders sent messages to Earth's governments demanding surrender. They expected the humans to accept defeat gracefully, as any rational species would. The hologram showed hegemony troops landing at major population centers. They moved in perfect formation, their advanced armor gleaming in the sunlight. Everything looked orderly and controlled. For 48 hours, it seemed like a normal occupation. Vextar continued. Humans were processed and moved to designated areas. Government officials were taken into custody for negotiation. Industrial facilities were secured for future use. Do-Yun leaned forward in his too-small chair. But something went wrong. Vextar's tentacles darkened. Wrong is not the right word. Something went unexpected. The display shifted to show incident reports from the third day of occupation. At first, they seemed minor. A supply convoy attacked by unknown forces, a communication array sabotaged, a patrol that failed to report in. The hegemony assumed these were isolated incidents, Vextar explained. Remnants of the human military causing trouble before being eliminated. This was normal for any occupation, but the reports kept coming. More attacks, more sabotage, more missing patrols. By day 7, the pattern became clear, Vextar said. The humans were not giving up. Instead, they were changing how they fought. The hologram now showed a completely different picture. Instead of organized military units, small groups of humans were appearing all over the planet. They struck quickly and then disappeared back into the civilian population. Jiho's crystal body flickered with confusion. But Professor, these were not soldiers. According to the records, many of these fighters were civilians. Factory workers, farmers, teachers. Exactly, Vextar said grimly. The humans had turned their entire population into an army. Men, women, even their young ones. Age did not matter. Training did not matter. Only resistance mattered. Mira spread her wings in agitation. This is impossible. Civilians cannot fight trained soldiers. They have no weapons, no tactics, no organization. Vextar touched his controls again. The hologram showed a human factory that had been converted overnight. Instead of making vehicles, it was now producing simple but effective explosive devices. The humans turned everything into a weapon, he explained. Farming chemicals became explosives. Kitchen knives became combat tools. Even their children's toys were modified to carry sensors and communication equipment. The display showed more examples. Humans using construction equipment to build barriers and traps. Scientists creating biological weapons that targeted alien physiology, engineers designing guidance systems for improvised missiles. But surely the hegemony adapted? Asked a student from the back of the room. They tried, Vextar replied. They increased patrols. They imposed stricter controls on the civilian population. They brought in more soldiers and better equipment. The hologram showed hegemony reinforcements arriving. More ships, more troops, more powerful weapons. For every action the hegemony took, the humans found a counteraction, Vextar continued. When the hegemony increased patrols, humans began attacking the patrol routes themselves. When they imposed curfews, humans started operating during the day disguised as ordinary civilians. Dohyun shook his massive head. This makes no sense. How can untrained civilians outthink professional soldiers? Vextar turned to face the big student. Because the humans were not thinking like soldiers. They were thinking like humans. The professor moved to the center of the room, his voice becoming more intense. Soldiers follow rules, he explained. They have objectives, strategies, codes of conduct. The hegemony expected the humans to fight like soldiers. Instead, they fought like a species facing extinction. The hologram showed a captured hegemony report from day 20 of the occupation. The commander's words appeared in translation. Enemy forces display no recognizable tactical doctrine. Attacks appear random but achieve strategic goals. Unable to predict next target. The humans did not fight to win battles, Vextar said. They fought to make the occupation impossible. Every day, every hour, every minute had to be a struggle for the hegemony forces. Jiho processed this information slowly. Professor, how long did this continue? For 134 days, Vextar replied. And it got worse. The display showed casualty reports. Not just military casualties, but psychological ones. Hegemony soldiers requesting transfers. Officers reporting stress and breakdown among their troops, you see, Vextar explained. The hegemony had prepared for war, but the humans gave them something else entirely. They gave them a never-ending fight against an enemy that could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. Mira's voice was quiet when she spoke. What happened to the rules of war? What about protecting civilians and limiting violence? Vextar looked at her with sad eyes. The humans had never heard of our rules, and even if they had, they would not have cared. He paused, letting this sink in. To the humans, this was not a war to be fought according to rules. This was a fight for survival. And when a species fights for survival, there are no rules. The hologram showed the final reports from the hegemony commanders. The words were chilling. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Continued occupation requires elimination of entire human population. This command is not prepared for genocide. Tomorrow, Vextar said quietly, we will learn about the specific tactics that forced the most powerful military in the galaxy to retreat from one primitive planet. He looked around the packed lecture hall, and we will begin to understand why the very word human now appears in our military manuals as a cautionary tale. The room emptied slowly. with students and instructors alike talking in hushed tones about what they had heard. The third day brought even more students to Professor Vexitar's lecture. News of the human story had spread throughout the academy, and now beings from every corner of the galaxy crowded into the hall. Some had even traveled from other schools just to hear what was being taught. Vexitar stood before the massive audience, his old tentacles moving slowly as he prepared to reveal the most disturbing part of the human war. "Today we discuss tactics," he announced. "Not the tactics taught in our military schools, but the tactics that should never exist." The holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of Earth during the occupation. Red dots marked hegemony positions while blue areas showed human-controlled territory. But the map looked wrong somehow. The colors were mixed together in ways that made no military sense. Jiho studied the display with his crystal mind. "Professor, this map is confusing. The battle lines are not clear. How can territory be controlled if there are no defined borders?" "Excellent observation," Vexitar replied. "You are looking at something that our military theorists said was impossible. A war with no front lines, no safe areas, and no clear distinction between combatants and civilians." Mira ruffled her feathers nervously. "But Professor, without clear battle lines, how can rules of engagement be followed? How can commanders protect non-combatants?" Vexitar's expression grew grim. That is exactly the problem the hegemony faced. The humans had made it impossible to follow the rules of civilized warfare. The display zoomed in on a human city. Hegemony forces controlled the government buildings, the main roads, and the industrial areas. But between these controlled zones, human resistance operated freely. "Watch this tactical analysis," Vexitar said, highlighting different areas of the city. The hegemony held the important locations during the day, but at night the humans took them back. Every morning the occupation forces had to resecure areas they thought they already controlled. Dohyun growled in frustration. Why did they not simply maintain guards at all positions? "They tried," Vexitar answered. "But the humans made guarding anything a deadly job." The hologram showed incident reports from week 4 of the occupation. Guards found dead at their posts, supply depots exploding without warning, communication equipment sabotaged while soldiers slept nearby. The humans had learned something terrible, Vexitar explained. They discovered that the hegemony's advanced technology was also a weakness. The display showed a hegemony patrol vehicle, its sophisticated systems glowing with power indicators. Hegemony equipment required specific fuels, replacement parts, and maintenance procedures, Vexitar continued. The humans began targeting these needs instead of the equipment itself. Jiho's light-refracting body dimmed as he processed this information. They attacked the supply chain rather than the military units? Precisely. Instead of trying to destroy a tank, they would poison the fuel depot that fed 50 tanks. Instead of attacking a communication center, they would cut the power lines that fed 10 communication centers. The hologram shifted to show a timeline of hegemony problems. Fuel shortages, parts delays, maintenance backlog, equipment failures. Mira was beginning to understand. The humans were making the hegemony's technology work against them. Worse than that, Vexitar said. They were learning from every encounter. Every hegemony tactic was studied, analyzed, and countered. The display showed captured human documents, technical manuals written by ordinary civilians about hegemony equipment. Farmers had written guides on destroying alien vehicles. Doctors had created biological agents that corroded alien metals. Teachers had developed training programs for resistance fighters. This should not have been possible, Vexitar said, his voice filled with disturb. Primitive beings should not be able to reverse engineer advanced technology so quickly. A student near the back raised a scaly appendage. Professor, how did they learn so fast? Vexitar activated a new section of the hologram. It showed human communication networks, not the official government channels that the hegemony had destroyed, but hidden networks created by the resistance. The humans shared everything, he explained. Every successful attack, every failed attempt, every piece of captured equipment was analyzed and the information distributed to every resistance cell on the planet. The display showed how knowledge flowed through the human population. A successful attack in one city would be replicated in dozens of other cities within days. Improvements and modifications were shared instantly across the globe. They turned their entire species into a learning machine, Vexitar said quietly. Every human became both student and teacher in the art of warfare. Do-hyun shifted uncomfortably. But surely the hegemony had superior training and experience. They did, Vextar agreed. But the humans negated that advantage in a way no one expected. The hologram showed a new type of report. Psychological evaluations of hegemony soldiers. Stress levels, fatigue indicators, combat effectiveness ratings. The humans realized that they could not defeat hegemony soldiers in direct combat, Vextar explained, so they decided to defeat them mentally instead. The display showed hegemony patrol routes. Every day the routes had to be changed because humans had planted explosives along the previous day's path. Every meal had to be tested because humans might have poisoned the food supply. Every building had to be searched because humans might be hiding inside. The humans made every moment of occupation dangerous and stressful, Vextar said. Hegemony soldiers could never relax, never feel safe, never trust their environment. Jiho's crystal form flickered with understanding. They were using fear as a weapon? Not fear, Vextar corrected. Uncertainty. The humans made it impossible for the hegemony to predict what would happen next. The hologram showed incident reports from Week 8. A supply convoy attacked by children with makeshift rockets. A command post infiltrated by a human disguised as a maintenance worker. A patrol ambushed by farmers using modified farming equipment. Every attack was different, Vextar explained. The humans never repeated the same tactic twice. Just when the hegemony thought they understood the pattern, the humans would do something completely unexpected. Mira spread her wings in agitation. This is not warfare. This is chaos, exactly, Vextar replied. And chaos is something the human species understands very well. He moved to the center of the room, addressing the packed audience directly. Our military traditions are based on order, honor, and predictable rules of engagement. We fight wars the way we play games, with clear objectives and established methods for achieving them. The professor paused, looking around the room. But the humans were not playing a game. They were fighting for their existence, and when a species fights for survival, they will use any method, any tactic, any weapon available to them. The hologram showed the final entry in this phase of the war, Week 12. Hegemony forces had been reinforced twice and now numbered over 100,000 soldiers. Yet the resistance was stronger than ever. By the end of the third month, Vextar said, the hegemony controlled less territory than they had after the first week. Every reinforcement sent to Earth only gave the humans more targets to attack and more equipment to capture. The room was completely silent as the implications sank in. Tomorrow, Vextar announced, we will learn about the final phase of the Terran integration war. We will discover what happened when the humans stopped playing defense and started playing offense. He looked out at the hundreds of alien faces, staring back at him. And we will understand why the hegemony's retreat was not a tactical withdrawal, but a desperate escape from something they could not comprehend. As the students filed out, many looked shaken by what they had learned. The idea that primitive beings could defeat advanced technology through pure determination was challenging everything they thought they knew about warfare. The fourth lecture drew the largest crowd yet. Students had skipped their other classes to attend, and the Academy's administration had moved the session to the main auditorium to accommodate everyone. Even senior faculty members sat in the front rows, their faces grim with anticipation. Professor Vextar walked onto the stage slowly, his tentacles moving with the weight of someone about to reveal a terrible truth. The massive holographic display behind him remained dark as he faced his audience. What I am about to show you, he began, violates several galactic treaties regarding the documentation of war crimes. I have special permission to share this information for educational purposes only. A murmur ran through the audience. War crimes were almost unknown in modern galactic society. The rules that governed civilized warfare made such things nearly impossible. By day 89 of the Terran integration war, Vextar continued, the humans had done something that no species in recorded history had ever attempted. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a view of Earth from space. But something was wrong with the image. Parts of the planet glowed with unnatural colors, and dark spots marked areas where cities should have been. Jiho's crystal body processed the visual data with confusion. Professor, what are we looking at? Those energy signatures do not match any normal planetary activity. Vextar's voice was barely above a whisper when he answered. "You are looking at a planet that has been weaponized." The audience fell completely silent. The humans had reached a conclusion that terrified the hegemony, Vextar explained. If they could not drive out the invaders through conventional resistance, they would make their entire world uninhabitable. The display zoomed in on a section of Earth's surface. What had once been a beautiful coastal region was now a landscape of destruction. The ground itself seemed to be burning. Human engineers deliberately triggered seismic events, Vextar said. They identified fault lines beneath major hegemony bases and used explosive charges to create earthquakes. Mira's feathers stood on end. They destroyed their own land to hurt the enemy? Not just their land, Vextar replied grimly. Look at this report from the Hegemony Geological Survey team. Text appeared on the display, translated from the original hegemony language. Humans have destabilized tectonic plates across 3 continents. Continued military operations may trigger planetary-scale seismic events. Recommend immediate evacuation of all ground forces. Do-hyun leaned forward, his massive frame tense with disbelief. They were willing to destroy their own planet? They were willing to deny it to their enemies, Vextar corrected. But the seismic weapons were only the beginning. The display shifted to show new horrors. Industrial facilities releasing clouds of toxic gas, rivers that glowed with radiation, forests that had been deliberately burned to create vast wastelands. The humans had turned their own planet into a weapon against the occupation forces, Vextar explained. But more importantly, they were preparing for something much worse. A new section of the hologram activated, showing the human space program during the war. Primitive rockets were launching with unusual frequency, carrying payloads into orbit around Earth. Intelligence reports from this period show that humans were preparing to weaponize their solar system, Vextar said. They planned to crash asteroids into their own planet if the hegemony did not withdraw. The audience gasped in horror. The idea of deliberately destroying one's home world was beyond comprehension for any civilized species. "But Professor," called a student from the middle of the auditorium, "surely this was just desperate threats. They could not actually follow through on such madness?" Vextar activated another section of the display. It showed captured human documents, technical specifications for guidance, systems that could redirect space objects toward planetary targets. The humans had calculated exactly which asteroids to target and how to modify their orbits, he explained. They were prepared to turn their own solar system into a weapon that would destroy everything, including themselves. The hologram showed timeline projections created by human scientists. Phase 1, seismic destabilization. Phase 2, environmental poisoning. Phase 3, asteroid bombardment. Phase 4, planetary sterilization. They called it the Scorched Earth Protocol, Vextar said quietly. Complete denial of all resources to enemy forces, regardless of cost to themselves. Jiho's light refracting form dimmed to almost nothing. "Professor, this is not warfare. This is species suicide." "To you and me, yes," Vextar agreed. "But to the humans, it was victory. They would rather die free than live as slaves." The display changed again, showing intercepted human communications from this period. The translations were chilling in their matter-of-fact tone. "If we cannot have our world, no one can have our world. Better to die on our feet than live on our knees. They can take our lives, but they cannot take our freedom." The hegemony psychological warfare specialists analyzed these messages, Vextar explained. Their conclusion was that the human species had entered a state of collective madness. Mira shifted uncomfortably on her perch. "What did the hegemony do? How did they respond to these threats?" Vextar's tentacles darkened completely. They tried to call the humans bluff. They increased military pressure, thinking that rational beings would eventually surrender rather than commit suicide. The hologram showed the results. Human resistance became even more fierce. Environmental damage accelerated. And then, on day 127, something happened that changed everything. The humans captured a hegemony battlecruiser, Vextar announced. The audience stirred with confusion. How could primitive beings capture an advanced starship? They did not capture it through superior technology or tactics, Vextar explained. They captured it through pure sacrifice. The display showed the incident in horrifying detail. Human pilots had used their primitive aircraft as guided missiles, crashing into the battlecruiser's engines. The ship, crippled and forced to land, was immediately swarmed by human ground forces. But here is where the story becomes truly terrifying, Vextar said. The humans did not try to repair the ship or reverse engineer its technology for their own use. New images appeared on the display. The captured battlecruiser being loaded with massive amounts of explosive material. They turned it into a bomb, Vextar said simply. The largest explosive device ever created by their species. The final image showed the battlecruiser's last flight, a one-way trip toward the main hegemony fleet in orbit. Human pilots, knowing they would die, had volunteered to fly the ship directly into the enemy formation. The attack failed, Vextar said. The ship was destroyed before it reached its target. But the message was received clearly by every hegemony commander. He paused, looking out at his shocked audience. The humans were not just willing to die for their freedom, they were eager to die for it. They considered death in battle to be preferable to surrender. Do-hyun spoke quietly. What happened next? Vextar deactivated the holographic display, leaving the auditorium in partial darkness. Next, he said, we will learn why the hegemony, despite having overwhelming technological superiority, decided that Earth was not worth conquering. He looked around. The vast auditorium filled with hundreds of alien students, and we will discover that the Terran integration war was not just a military defeat for the hegemony. It was a revelation that changed how every species in the galaxy thinks about the nature of warfare itself. As the crowd slowly dispersed, conversations were hushed and troubled. Many students looked pale or agitated, struggling to process the idea of a species that would destroy itself rather than accept defeat. The very concept challenged everything they thought they knew about rational behavior and the will to survive. The final lecture was held in the Academy's largest facility, a massive amphitheater normally reserved for graduation ceremonies. Students from dozens of worlds had traveled to hear the conclusion of the human story. News feeds from across the galaxy carried live broadcasts of the event, and military leaders from every major species watched from their home worlds. Professor Vextar stood at the center of the stage, surrounded by holographic displays that remained dark. The weight of 1,000 eyes fell upon him as he prepared to reveal the final truth about humanity. 3 cycles ago, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. The Galactic Council made a decision. They voted to send a diplomatic mission to Earth to reassess the human species. A murmur ran through the audience. Many had not known about this recent contact. The war we have been studying happened over a century ago. Vextar continued. Surely the Council reasoned the humans had grown more civilized in that time. Surely they had learned the value of peace and cooperation. The first holographic display activated, showing modern Earth. The planet was transformed from the war-torn world they had been studying. Gleaming cities reached toward the sky. Massive orbital stations circled the planet. Clean energy systems provided power without pollution. Jiho's crystal form brightened with relief. Professor, this looks like a civilized world. Surely humans have joined galactic society by now. Vextar's expression remained grim. That is what the diplomatic mission hoped to find. They approached Earth with peaceful intentions, offering trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and membership in the Galactic Council. Mira tilted her head curiously. What was the human response? The humans were polite, welcoming, and eager to learn about galactic civilization, Vextar replied. They hosted the diplomatic team for several weeks, showing them around their planet and sharing their culture. The holographic display showed scenes from the diplomatic visit. Humans and aliens working together on various projects, cultural presentations, scientific exchanges. Everything looked positive and encouraging. The diplomatic team was impressed, Vextar said. Human technology had advanced remarkably. Their society seemed stable and peaceful. They appeared ready to join the galactic community as productive members. Do-hyun leaned forward hopefully. So the ban was lifted? Vextar was quiet for a long moment. Then he activated another holographic display. The diplomatic team made one mistake, he said slowly. They asked the humans about their defensive capabilities. The new display showed a presentation given by human military officials to the diplomatic mission. At first glance, it looked like a standard briefing about planetary defense systems. The humans were happy to share this information, Vextar explained. They were proud of their preparedness and eager to show how they had learned from their previous encounter with galactic civilization. The holographic presentation began to play. A human military officer stood before a display showing Earth's defensive systems. Advanced orbital platforms, sophisticated missile networks, powerful energy weapons. Impressive, commented a student. But not unusual for a species ready to join galactic society. Vextar's tentacles darkened. Keep watching. The human presentation continued. The officer began discussing theoretical scenarios for planetary defense. Different types of alien invasions, various technological advantages that attackers might possess, methods for countering superior enemy forces. The humans had spent 127 cycles studying their first war, Vextar explained. They had analyzed every aspect of the conflict and identified what they considered to be their mistakes. The presentation showed human war games and training exercises. But these were unlike anything the galactic community had ever seen. Entire populations participating in resistance drills, children learning to build weapons from household items, elderly citizens practicing sabotage techniques. Jiho's crystal body flickered with confusion. Professor, why would a peaceful species train their civilians for warfare? Because, Vextar replied, they are not a peaceful species. They are a species that hopes for peace but prepares for war. The human presentation moved to its most disturbing section, theoretical combat scenarios against 47 different types of alien species, detailed strategies for fighting enemies with various technological advantages, methods for turning Earth's entire solar system into a weapon. They had contingency plans, Vextar said quietly, for wars that did not exist. Mira spread her wings in agitation. But surely these were just theoretical exercises. Academic planning for unlikely scenarios? The holographic display showed the human officer's response to that exact question. His words appeared in translation. We hope these plans will never be needed. But hope is not a strategy. We prepare for everything because we learned that the galaxy is a dangerous place. The diplomatic team asked about human intentions regarding galactic warfare. Vextar continued. They explained our rules of civilized combat and asked if humans would be willing to follow them. Another section of the presentation began. The human officer discussing the Geneva-Andromeda Accords with polite but obvious skepticism. These rules assume that both sides want to preserve civilization, the officer said. But what if the enemy wants to destroy civilization? What if following the rules means losing everything? The diplomatic team tried to explain that modern galactic warfare was about limited objectives and controlled violence. Wars were fought to resolve disputes, not to destroy entire species. The human response was chilling in its simplicity. If someone attacks our world, it is not a dispute. It is an attempt at genocide, and we will respond accordingly. The diplomatic team realized they had made a terrible mistake, Vextar said. They had assumed that human military thinking had evolved along with their technology. Do-hyun spoke quietly. What did they find instead? They found a species that had spent over a century perfecting the art of total warfare, Vextar replied. Humans had not become more civilized. They had become more efficient. The final section of the human presentation was the most disturbing. Plans for offensive operations against potential alien threats, strategies for taking war to enemy homeworlds, methods for turning captured alien technology into weapons of mass destruction. The humans had studied every known galactic species, Vextar explained. They had developed specific tactics for fighting each one. They had contingency plans for scenarios that our military theorists had never even considered. The holographic display showed charts and graphs detailing human military capabilities, production capacity for war materials, training programs for rapid military expansion, research projects developing new weapons technologies. When asked about their goals for galactic integration, Vextar said, the human response was both hopeful and terrifying. The final clip from the presentation played. The human officer speaking directly to the diplomatic team. We want to join galactic civilization as friends and partners. We want to trade, learn, and grow together, but we will never again be unprepared for war. If peace fails, we will be ready. The holographic displays went dark, leaving the amphitheater in relative silence. The diplomatic team's final report was unanimous, Vextar announced. Humans remain banned from galactic warfare, not because they are too primitive to understand our rules, but because they have evolved beyond them. He paused, looking out at the vast audience of alien students. In a galaxy where war has become civilized, humans represent something we thought we had left behind. They represent war as an existential struggle, war as survival itself. Jiho's voice was barely audible when he spoke. Professor, what does this mean for the future? Vextar walked to the edge of the stage, his old eyes reflecting the weight of knowledge. It means that we must never allow humans to participate in our conflicts, he said firmly, because they do not fight wars the way we do. They fight them the way wars were fought in the old days. Before civilization, before rules, before mercy, he looked directly at his students. And it means that we must hope they never decide that the galaxy itself poses a threat to their survival. The professor moved back to center stage for his final words. Class dismissed, he said quietly. Remember what you have learned here. Some forces in the universe are too dangerous to unleash, even in the name of progress. As the massive crowd slowly dispersed, conversations were hushed and troubled. Students from warrior races looked shaken. Diplomats reconsidered their assumptions about primitive species. Military officers made mental notes to update their threat assessments. In the depths of space, monitoring stations tracked a small human exploration vessel as it approached the edge of the Sol system. The ship carried scientists and diplomats, peaceful explorers hoping to make contact with galactic civilization. But it also carried something else. Hidden in its computer systems were copies of every military plan, every defensive strategy, and every offensive capability that humanity had developed over the past century. The galaxy watched and waited, hoping that humanity's expansion into space would be peaceful. But now they understood that hope, as the humans had learned long ago, was not a strategy. And in the darkness between stars, other monitoring stations began updating their alert protocols, adding new classifications to their threat assessment databases.